Alright, welcome to Wilson's Creek National Battlefield. My name is Dennis. We'll be doing an artillery demonstration for you today. And what's going to happen is we're going to fire a round. And then I'll talk about what the artillery was like, what kind of rounds they used, and we'll talk about each one of the positions and what they all did. My only warning to you is, when the gunner says ready, it means there's going to be a loud noise pretty quick. Gunner, take charge of your detachment, commence fire.
Here, steer post.
Whistle, shot, load. Okay, artillery is generally used as an anti-personnel weapon. It is the only weapon that cannoneers have available to them. They are not allowed to carry sidearms. They don't carry swords or anything else. The reason for that is they need to defend themselves with that cannon and don't let it get captured. That is their gun. Now, they use several different types of ammunition. We'll talk about each one of those, and they all had different purposes. The longest range piece of ammunition they had was a solid shot. Now, can anybody tell, that's a 6-pounder, by the way. Can you tell me why it's called a 6-pounder? Yep.
Because it shot a 6-pound ball.
Because that's exactly right. That solid shell weighed 6 pounds. That's how they classified guns back then, cannons. So this is a 6-pound ball of steel. It has a wooden sabot on it and a powder bag full of 1 1/4 pounds of black powder. That would be a standard solid shot. These were made up in the armory and they were shipped out here to the cannon crews. They didn't have to make them out here. This is how they got them, just like this. Now the range for this round would be about 1,500 yards, 4/5 of a mile, or if you'd rather have a visual, the second set of trees out there on the horizon would be about 1,500 yards. So that's what we would be shooting at. Something out that far. Now the second type of ammunition they might use is called a spherical case shot. It is actually hollow and filled with musket balls and a small powder charge to cause this thing to explode and break apart. Now the musket balls are held in place by some type of, like rosin or pine pitch or something to keep them all in there. And then it's either drilled out or they've kept a hole in there and they pour powder in there. And then there's a fuse placed in there. Now if the gunner calls for spherical case shot, he will tell the people preparing his ammunition for him how long he wants that fuse to burn. 5, 4, 3, or 2 seconds. And that will say how far out it's going to go before it explodes. When it explodes, it breaks apart. The case will break apart into pieces like this, and then the musket balls come out as well. So it's pretty much an anti-personnel round. Anybody tell me, what do you call this kind of stuff when it's coming at you?
Shrapnel.
Shrapnel. Do you know where that name comes from? a British officer, British Army officer by the name of Henry Shrapnel invented that round. And so that's where the name for shrapnel comes from. Now the third type of round that we might fire is called a canister round. It's a tin canister filled with 27 steel balls about 1 inch in diameter. Really? Anyway,
Modern
think of
aircraft.
it as a shotgun shell for a cannon, because that's pretty much what it is. This canister will break apart when it leaves the barrel, and 27 steel balls are going after the infantry. The effective range of this would be about to the fence line there, and it's strictly anti-personnel. When they're starting to overrun your position, you're going to start firing canister shots. Now the rounds that they carry are carried in 3 different places, depending on where you want to talk about it. First of all, the limber, which is what actually tows that cannon around. 6 horses would be attached to the limber. The cannon would be on the back side, and that's how they would move it around from place to place. There are 50 rounds in the ammunition chest on top of that limber. 25 rounds of solid, 20 rounds of spherical case, and 5 rounds of canister. Now in addition to that, each cannon also has a second limber and a case on, which is over here on this side. All the ammunition chests are filled identically. So each one of those has 50 rounds of ammunition for a total of 200 rounds for 1 cannon. Typically you would have 6 cannon in a battery. You have 1,200 rounds in a battery of cannon, all ready to go after the enemy. Not a pretty sight. So, gunners. So we posted attachments, and we'll go over what each of the crew members' positions do. Each of the crew members are cross-trained. They are given specific positions, but they can all fill in any position. Should one person be injured or killed, any one of the others can step in and fill in that position. We'll start out with position number 1. He's on the right outside of the front wheel. He is the one that prepares the cannon to be fired. He has in his hand a sponge rammer. On one end is a fleece covering, which he'll wet in a sponge bucket, which just is a bucket with water in it. And that is to put out any embers that might be left in the barrel. On the other end of that is a wooden block, which he uses to ram the round back to the breech. So at the command load, he steps in, he'll wet the sponge in the sponge bucket, and he'll ram into the barrel to put out any of those embers. When he draws it back out, he will tap the barrel to indicate to the rest of the crew that the cannon is ready to be loaded. Once the round is placed in the barrel for him, he will ram that round into the breech. He then steps back outside the wheel, and at the command ready, he breaks away from the muzzle to avoid some of the muzzle flash and not be injured by it. Position number 2 is the man that actually loads the cannon. He will have ammunition brought up to him by one of the other crew members. So at the command load, he steps inside, facing out to the other where he would get the ammunition. When it's brought up to him, he takes it out of the pouch, places it into the barrel, steps back outside the wheel. At the command ready, he leans back again to avoid the muzzle flash, and etc. Number 3. Number 3 has a lot of different jobs. At the command load, he steps in and places his thumb over the vent. On his thumb, he has a thumb stall, which is a heavy piece of leather to help keep his thumb safe from any of the embers or heat that might be trying to come out of that vent. That fits over his thumb. He has his elbow elevated because the gunner is going to need to sight down the barrel underneath his arm. Once the round has been rammed into the breech, he will step back to the handspike, and at whatever gunner commands him, move the gun left or right for whatever the gunner desires for the next shot. Once that's completed, he steps back to his position, and at the command ready, he once again steps in, he takes a brass wire that's been sharpened on one end and he places it down the vent to poke a hole into the powder bag so that when the primer goes off, it can actually get to the powder inside the powder bag. He then will assist the number 4 position with steadying the lanyard until it's taut, and then he will move back outside. Everybody is always outside the wheels before the cannon is fired. In an actual cannon shot, if you were actually firing a 12-pound or a 6-pound round, the cannon could move backwards 4 to 5 feet when you fire the cannon. Since we're just firing blanks, it doesn't go anywhere because there's no resistance to cause it to push back. One of Newton's laws from way back when. Okay, that's the end of the physics lesson. All right, let's see. Number 4 is the man that actually fires the cannon. At the command load, he takes a lanyard and a primer out of the pouch on his right hip. He prepares that by hooking the lanyard to the primer. Now the primer is simply a piece of copper, hollow copper. It's only about an inch tall, so it would be real hard for you to see it if I held one up here, so I've got a large mock-up of it here. Basically filled with powder, and it has kind of like a kitchen match type inside, which is attached to this wire. That's the wire that he would pull on with the lanyard. So when he pulls that out, it's like striking a match, ignites the powder, which shoots the charge down to the powder in the powder bag, and ignites the round, send it down range. At the command ready, he steps in, and after the powder bag has been punctured by number 3, he'll place the primer into the vent along with his lanyard. He steps out, and at the command fire, he pulls the lanyard to fire the cannon. Number 5 is the gentleman who actually takes all the ammunition from the limber up to the cannon. Whatever the gunner calls for, he goes back, gets it from the other 2 crewmen back there, carries it up in the leather pouch, and gives it to number 2. He carries it in the leather pouch for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're firing black powder, which can have a lot of sparks hanging around. We don't want that round to go off prematurely while he's carrying it up there. We also might be in the rain, and we don't want the powder to get wet. Wet black powder will not do anything. Number 6 and 7 are the 2 gentlemen back at the limber. They are charged with preparing the rounds as ordered by the gunner. If he orders a spherical case shot, they must prepare the fuse to the number of seconds that he calls for so that it explodes at the correct time. And finally, the gunner. The gunner is typically a non-commissioned officer, probably a corporal. He is in charge of the gun. When he gives the command to load, he then steps forward and puts a sight on the back of the cannon called a pendelhaus. He uses that, it's kind of like the rear sight on a rifle. He uses that to sight the weapon for where he wants it. He has an elevation screw which he will turn to elevate or depress the cannon barrel. He then will tap the trail to move the cannon left or right, as done by number 3. Once he's satisfied with the aiming, he uses the touchdown signal to signal that he's ready for it to be fired. He steps off to the side so that he can see the fall of shot. If he stood behind it, all he would see would be smoke. So he steps off to the side so that he can adjust his next round. He would then give the command to fire. Okay, gunner, take charge of your detachment, commence fire.
Engineer, steer post.
Again, be careful if your ears are sensitive. When he says ready, it's time to plug your ears. So you'll notice number 1 and 2 are stepping in. Number 1 is sponging the barrel. Number 2 is waiting for his round. Number 5 is bringing the round up from the ammunition chest. Number 3 is in covering the vent. Number 4 is preparing the primer. Number 2 gets the round, places it into the barrel. Number 1 rams the round back to the breech. So number 3 now steps back to the handspike, move the cannon left or right. He's satisfied with the sighting and gives the touchdown signal.
Ready.
1 and 2 step to the rear. 3 and 4 step in to attach the primer. Number 3 pokes the spike down to puncture the bag. Number 4 stretches the lanyard, ready to fire.
Fire! Cease fire. Secure the beach.
Now, a good cannon crew would be able to do that again in about 20 seconds in extremis. In other words, they're not trying to aim every shot. Typically, if they're carefully aiming each shot, it'd be about 1 round a minute. As soon as they secure the weapon, you'll be welcome to go up there and take a look at it, ask any questions you would like, and let's thank our crew for their work today. By the way, we do have an all-volunteer crew today. We volunteer out here because we love spending the park's money to burning up black powder, and they love seeing us stand out here in the sun in wool uniforms. So, it's kind of a trade-off. But thank you very much for your time. You're welcome to go up there.